With so many prominent universities all competing in the same talent pool for their next head coach, it is inevitable that one university's job is going to be utilized as leverage for another university's benefit, which is precisely why maybe we should take one last NFL-sized swing before we go the traditional route.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in all of our Big 12 brethren. Shout out to all of the regulators out here. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your top stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet's a winner, you'll get $300 back in bonus bets to use all across the app. Make sure that you download the FanDuel app today. Meanwhile, we get to slide right into this conversation of the coaching search. And it's inevitability that one of these coaches is going to utilize a particular job opening as leverage to get what they want out of another job. And with jobs like Penn State and LSU and Florida being available, Oklahoma State is likely to be in the camp of schools that are utilized in a leveraging position. So if we look at a top five style scenario, and Alex Goulash was my number one, it would be wise for Alex Goulash to utilize his connections to Oklahoma State as leverage for another job, perhaps an LSU style of position. And nobody could fault him if he were to do that, which is precisely why I'm thinking if our donors are still out there making heavy swings, maybe we shouldn't give up on the NFL route yet. I do know that there is some discussions in regards to will the NFL model be transferable to the college game, because guys like Bill Belichick haven't been able to kind of slide seamlessly in, especially in this new NIL transfer portal era. Matt Rule is having some success in Nebraska, but it's not like he took an NFL formula to Nebraska. He took the formula he had at Baylor, tried to make it transferable to the NFL, didn't work out, goes back to Nebraska. And of course, that model that he had at Baylor is still going to be successful because it was successful at Temple as well. The NFL model wasn't necessarily the creme de la creme for his amount of success. And when people discuss Zac Robinson, other than the fact that he hasn't been a head coach before, that seems to be one of the limiting factors, is the NFL model doesn't always seem to be transferable into college football, especially now in a completely new era where having discussions with the donors and NIL and boosters and all of that is more important now than it ever has been. You don't have to have the backdoor bag man, although I'm sure that there's still some places that'll utilize those individuals. It's not a necessity, right? You can be a little bit more transparent about your involvement nowadays. And so there's a lot of things in the NFL that are not transferable because you're not running the entire operation the same way you would in college. That seems to be a knock. But at the same point in time, I don't think Todd Monken would be an individual that would utilize Oklahoma State's offer as leverage just to get something else. And undoubtedly, there is going to be some individuals that do utilize Oklahoma State as that leveraging point. And it does, unfortunately, make some sense. Oklahoma State is still one of the top jobs available, so it's not going to be a ton of options that are going to leverage Oklahoma State as a lesser component, but it is going to happen, which is why Todd Monken would be a perfect fit to come back to Oklahoma State. And yes, I did already put out that he would be my top tier. My dream scenario was Todd Monken as head coach, Zac Robinson as offensive coordinator, Eric Henderson as defensive coordinator. And that's another layer that Todd Monken would be able to bring in, is his accessibility to not only the NFL side of things, but also the Oklahoma State Big 12 side of things. He's built a ton of connections. He has a ton of transferable knowledge, and he's going to have NFL level connections. So I do think that would be something, as far as the sales pitch would go, that would put Todd Monken in the upper echelon of the Big 12 recruiting realm. Obviously, if you were to give us Eric Henderson as DC, Zac Robinson as offensive coordinator, I think that would spice that up. But even if, Zac Robinson wasn't going to be the ideal candidate at Oklahoma State, maybe Todd Monken is still an option. And I've gone back and forth with this. One of the first things I had thought was that Todd Monken would not be interested because of how close he is with Mike Gundy. And I didn't figure that he'd want to be the guy to replace his buddy that went out, negatively. If Mike Gunny would have gone out as a Big 12 champ or multiple 10-win seasons, then perhaps this would be different. But if there's still going to be a big-time swing that we take, it's got to be Todd Monken. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be Eric Henderson as DC or Zac Robinson as offensive coordinator. I think Josh Henson's an individual that's going to deserve a legitimate look as an offensive coordinator. Jim Knowles, yeah, he has definitely elevated himself to be a head coach, but he did that at Ohio State, and he didn't have to take the DC job at Penn State. I'm sure that there was some offers for him to be a head coach after he just won a natty at Ohio State that he largely has turned down. So there's a ton of scenarios that could equal a dream scenario, whether it be Todd Monken, Josh Henson, Jim Knowles, or Todd Monken, Zac Robinson, Eric Henderson. There's a bunch of different ways we could go, not to mention the fact that some of his most successful seasons in the NFL this season or during his time has been with a couple Cowboys, and obviously Tylan Wallace and Justice Hill. His revolutionary moments with Lamar Jackson are definitely something that Oklahoma State fans can review back to 2010, 2011, and understand that he would be a good fit. Age seems to be a little bit of a limiting factor. But again, the benefit to Todd Monken is that he's been to Oklahoma State. He knows how it goes. He knows how to recruit. He does have a very big name, not only in college, but also in the NFL, because he also had a massively successful stop at Georgia after Oklahoma State as a coordinator. So he has that pedigree when it comes to recruiting the SEC country. He already did that successfully while he was at Oklahoma State, recruiting Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas. And I just think that connection would be brilliant for Oklahoma State, because he's not going to use us as leverage like maybe an Alex Golesh would. I'm not saying Alex Golesh would, but it would make some sense. If, say, an LSU knows that Alex Golesh is very interested in the Oklahoma State job, and he can convey, or his agent can convey that, yeah, the Alex Golesh to Stillwater thing does make sense because there's connectivity there going back to his family and when he coached there at Oklahoma State. So if you want Alex Golesh to go to Baton Rouge over Stillwater America, you're going to have to give us X, Y, or Z. And LSU is going to have the ability to do so. So would Florida. So would Penn State. But at the end of the day, I don't think that going the traditional, roster building college coach is a complete necessity. There's going to be some unknowns with almost anybody that we bring in. So why not swing for the fences and go with somebody that does have a ton of connections to Oklahoma State, to this recruiting area, and carries enough of a name nationally to spark a huge amount of interest in Oklahoma State. Speaking of sparking an interest, you need to get squared away today with FanDuel, the bee's knees for all of your betting needs. The NBA action is here, and there's not a better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next point to who's going to lead the fourth quarter comeback. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's the one making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 back in bonus bets when your first $5 hauler is a winner. Head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up today and play your game with FanDuel, of course, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We're going to jump right back into this with a reconnection of sorts. The topical conversation has been how many decommitments Oklahoma State has had. So it is absolutely remarkable to see somebody come back into the fold, and that being Berry Hill offensive lineman Aiden Martin, who was one of the first commits to Oklahoma State in this recruiting cycle. And it's kind of surprising to see some names, jump out of the commitment realm. Thankfully, Braden Presley has stayed in it, which after some of the things that transpired with Braylon, I think a lot of us could understand at least the sentiment that could be conveyed for him exploring other options. But Aiden Martin did not do that. He did get out. He decommitted. He probably looked at other options, But at the end of the day, his heart was always in Stillwater. So I completely understand there's a business landscape to all of this. And if there's some instability and you don't know what your future is going to look like, I completely agree with the decommitting thing. I'm just glad that Aiden Martin didn't make a rash decision and immediately commit elsewhere, because I do think that some of the guys that gave themselves a little bit of timing probably earn extra points, right? And I caught some flack earlier because I said on X that Katie Batman Jones is very disappointing the way that all of that transpired, because it never seemed like, it never felt like, I never heard anything about we're committing to Mike Gundy. It was all about Oklahoma State and how it's like family, and they're much better at recruiting, and they're much better at just including what the plan for Katie was going to be moving forward, and how Oklahoma State is the home state, and it's all about family. So to turn around, decommit, and then commit elsewhere in a matter of days, to me, just kind of felt slightly disingenuous. So I love seeing the fact that Aiden Martin didn't do that. He decommitted, sure. He looked elsewhere, sure. He had some conversations with other places, sure. But at the end of the day, his heart was always going to be in Stillwater. So even though we don't have a new coach yet, we don't know what layers are going to come out of the Doug Meacham and the Clint Bowen and the Kevin Johns situation. Even though we don't know all that, guys like Braden Presley and Aiden Martin have said, you know what? I committed to Oklahoma State University. I did not commit to just Mike Gundy. I didn't commit just to Corey Patterson. I committed to Oklahoma State. So I want to honor that commitment. I don't begrudge like Taj Overton. Taj Overton just recently committed to Mizzou, but that was within the last week. So at least Taj Overton decided to decommit and not immediately, jump in elsewhere. Because to me, that kind of feels like a little bit of a slap in the face. At least waiting to see how the season's going to go. At least wait to see what you're hearing in regards to who the new coach is going to be. And thank the heavens, Aiden Martin decided to rise above all of that and say, you know what? I'm going to go with my gut. My gut says Oklahoma State was always the right choice, regardless of who was going to be the head coach. And for that, Aiden Martin just catapulted himself into a completely different hemisphere, in my personal opinion. Because, again, I think you have to have some of those loyal and true type of individuals to have success at Oklahoma State. Yes, you have to be good at recruiting. You have to uptick your NIL. You have to have a better plan for marketability, profitability, etc. But you also have to have some of those tried and true dudes that it just means more for. And then Aiden Martin had a quote. This was recently put out the other day by, I believe, RA. Aiden Martin said, I realized when I first committed to Oklahoma State, honestly, that is where I wanted to be. I love the people and I love the place. I hated to see Coach Gundy go, but sometimes you have to roll with the punches. When I recommitted, schools came through, but honestly, it wasn't Stillwater and it wasn't Oklahoma State. So nobody else he talked to gave the same experience that he got in Stillwater. And the beauty of this, again, is he did this without having the next head coach lined up. So we got to give a shout out to Aiden Martin here, because it's a tumultuous period right now in recruiting. So guys like Braden Presley, who has stayed committed the entire time, no matter what. Landon Bland, the 6'4", 220-pound edge rusher out of Carthage, Missouri. I know words are hard for me. He stayed locked and loaded. Malik Bracey, a cornerback, 6'1", 190 pounds out of Argyle, Texas, still in the fold. Brandon Ford, the guy that we convinced to decommit from KU, ironically enough, from Crowley, Texas, the 5'11", 175-pound corner, he stayed committed. Soani Vuki, the interior offensive lineman, standing at 6'3", 350 pounds from Folsom, California, he's still committed. Brighton New, of anybody on this list who had a viable reason to potentially decommit, it might be Brighton New, because his brother committed to Oklahoma State, decommitted from Oklahoma State, decided to go to OU. So if there's anybody on this list that has a family level of connection that could equal them decommitting from Oklahoma State and it making the most amount of sense, it might be Brighton. So shout out to these individuals that are not going against the grain and they're rolling with the punches, as Aiden Martin said. It's not an ideal scenario. The staff turnover, it's not the best for everybody out here in recruiting country. But at the end of the day, you have to have some dudes that care more about the name on the front than the name on the back. And unfortunately, we experienced that on the field this season, first handful of weeks. It was very visible, right? That there were some individuals that weren't willing to put forth the same amount of effort as some of the other dudes. And you're seeing more success with Oklahoma State this season that some of those other individuals are getting to play. And by and large, those Parker Robertsons, those are the ones who had to go through the walk-on program, and they had to battle through all the adversity and had to earn more playing time and do it through the scout team and do it through special teams. Those guys are not going to be readily available as much anymore. But at least we now know that no matter what happens, at the end of the day, we've got some guys in this recruiting class that are completely sold, bought in to being loyal and true, to being part of the Cowboy culture that Mike Gundy helped establish for so long, that was so successful for so long. You got to have faith that Oklahoma State is where you're supposed to be. It's where you want to be. And you have to have faith that the same people that are responsible for helping you love Oklahoma State are going to be the ones that are responsible for the next coach coming in and upticking the level of success or getting us back to where Mike Gundy had us for so long. Aiden Martin seemingly has that faith that it goes beyond just Mike Gundy. Because I know Chad Weiberg called most of these decommits, if not every single one of them. And a good number of them, you've noticed, they haven't committed elsewhere. They didn't immediately decommit and jump on board somewhere else. They're being patient. They're waiting to see what happens. They're waiting to see who we hire and who we fire and who we bring in. And to me, that's how it should be. Again, I completely understand you decommitting. When a coach is fired, that is a logical, practical decision to make. But then to immediately jump into somebody else's arms, it just seems to be the scorn lover kind of thing, right? If you have a significant other that has proclivities to do crazy stuff, those proclivities don't just magically go away. That's probably going to still be the same kind of partner. And I think you can view that with Oklahoma State. Just because you don't have a coach, just because you're about to bring in another coach, it doesn't mean that you should jump into the next loving arms. In my personal opinion, I think that is a bad look. So, yeah, apparently me talking about it was a bad look too. So I don't know. Let me know down in the comment section what y'all think of it. Thankfully, we get to continue right on to the Big 12 finally getting some love. The CFP committee came out with their first poll, and Utah's right outside of the top 12, sitting at number 13. Then you have BYU and Texas Tech both sitting right there at the 7-8 slots. They're about to play each other. So we're getting that SEC bump based off of rankings that we don't typically get. And easily the CFP could decide that the Big 12 only gets one representative in, right? That could easily happen. But if you look at Utah sitting at 13, BYU and Texas Tech both factoring into that component pretty heavily, right in front of them is OU and Texas, right in front of Utah. And they both have big-time games coming up. One of them's got to play Bama. One of them's got to play Georgia. Another one I think Texas has to play both of those individuals still yet. So there's a lot of craziness that could still happen. Notre Dame is still kind of figuring into that mix. But the important factor here is sometimes the initial polls that they put out are pretty indicative of kind of where they're stacking things up. And this one might be the best of the bunch, not because it's got multiple Big 12 teams involved, but because strength of schedule does seem to be important. The ACC is getting chastised to some degree, and the strength of schedule components seems to be something that's factoring in. And so the Big 12 is finally getting some of the respect that it deserves this is the bipolar Big 12. This is the conference where anybody can almost beat anybody for the most part. And because Arizona State performed admirably last year, perhaps we're getting a little bit of an extra bump. A lot of things can change. The Big 12 could get completely squeezed out. But if this first poll tells us anything, it's that they see 2 Big 12 teams getting in, possibly even 3. Whenever Drake Toll talked about that on the squad show, I thought it was absolutely crazy. There's no way the committee was going to allow the Big 12 to get 3 teams in. It was never going to happen. But it does seem to be a possibility because they clearly appreciate Utah. They positioned Utah in a spot knowing that OU and Texas have big games coming up. Notre Dame has a big game coming up. A lot of these teams that are currently sitting in that top 12, they could easily be bounced out pretty quickly. And you could say the same to some degree about Texas Tech, right? If BYU beats them, could Tech potentially find themselves on the outside looking in? Yes, they could, but that may not be a bad position to be in either because they clearly value Tech and BYU and Utah to the SEC almost levels. So it's nice to finally see the Big 12 getting some respect, but here is the crescendo. If we're going to continue to get the respect, we have to do something with it. Arizona State could have, maybe even should have, beat Texas last year, but it didn't happen. TCU did beat Michigan, but nobody remembers that because of what happened against Georgia in the Natty. And again, there's this perception of the Big 12 that's going to take somebody breaking through the glass ceiling to kind of correct some of that. I don't care if it ends up being Utah. With all the crap that we talk to Utah and how much crap Utah fans talk on the Big 12, it wouldn't be the ideal scenario, right? But TCU still has a prospect of kind of squeezing into this thing. So, yeah, this could be a year where the Big 12 does get 3 teams in. But even if we don't get 3, even if we only get 2, we just have to have somebody make a run. And if we have somebody that ends up in the Natty, they just can't get beat by 56 or whatever the case was for that TCU Georgia Natty game. But it starts with getting some of that entry-level respect. Once you get it, you have to capitalize. You have to do something with it. That was my biggest complaint about Mike Gundy's tenure at Oklahoma State was the moments that we had to capitalize. It just kind of felt like we weren't able to do that. The Big 12 is in that position right now. The worst thing that can happen is the committee finally give the Big 12 some respect, and the Big 12, whether we get 2 or 3 teams in, completely fall flat. If you go 0-2, 0-3, obviously that's not going to carry you any favors moving forward. But if the Big 12 does get 2 teams in or even 3 teams in, and we have at least one of those make it to the Natty or 2 of those make it to the Final Four, then I think that does put the Big 12 in the position that it needs to moving forward. This is a respect-driven industry. And national punditry don't really respect the Big 12. The CFP committee hasn't respected the Big 12 up until now. And again, I know this is the first ranking. A lot of things could change. They could easily decide at the very last one, actually, we're going to kick back some of these Big 12 schools. But at least they seem to be positioning multiple Big 12 schools at the right position to do something with it and to get to that CFP and to make a little bit of a run and give the Big 12 a little bit more of that respect that we might just now be starting to get. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. The Cowgirls are getting after it, so I'm going to go finish this ball game. Guys, Haley Timmer, that girl's a beast. What an acquisition for JC Hoy. Anywho, all right, y'all. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it, dislike if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe. A podcast and people out there, you're everything that makes this work. I appreciate what you do. So go do what you do. Hit the stars. Leave some reviews. All right, y'all. Later, taters.